Hello and welcome to How to Deal with Grief and Trauma. My name is Natalie Himmelrich. Today I speak with Ian Weedon, who has lost half of his family in the past few years. Listen to him telling us how he deals with loss and trauma in his later stage of life. Together we also explore how the loved one's presence can be felt in very different ways, and not always the way we want it or expect it. Ian's life story shows the reality of living a life after loss. Ian says,
Well, of course, my life is very different. I only have the responsibility to my daughter now. I don't have the responsibility to the other half of the family. I miss them greatly. My life is not as good without them, that's for sure. And in spite of all the work that Anne's position entailed, I miss that. I have a lot more freedom now, but I prefer it as it was.
Originally from South Africa, Ian has been living in Switzerland for the past 36 years. He and his late wife Anne had two amazing children. Sadly, their son Derrick was killed in a motor accident in 2013 when he was just 34. Derrick had been married for just a year before his death, and subsequently his late wife sued Ian's daughter for money. The family endured 4 years of hardship on the top of the grief. Ian's wife Anne suffered from MS for 40 years, starting soon after they were married. Despite all the challenges, they had a wonderful life together. Anne was wheelchair-bound for 18 years. She was partly and then for the last few years entirely dependent on Ian. Anne died in 2018. Ian misses both Anne and Derrick, and especially their smiles and touches. Ian feels extremely lucky to still have his wonderful, loving daughter. In today's episode, we talk about Derrick's traumatic loss through a car accident and how Ian needed to break the news to his wife and daughter. He also shares about Anne's life with MS and her subsequent death, and how he, Ian, adjusted to life without half of his family. And as said before, together we discuss the presence of the lost loved ones in our lives. Please enjoy today's episode. Welcome, Ian. Nice to have you here on the podcast, and thank you so much for your time. How are you doing today?
I'm okay. The weather's not so okay, but otherwise I'm fine.
Why don't you tell us your story of loss and trauma?
Well, my first loss was my son, who was 31, about 10 years ago, nearly 10 years ago. And he was killed in a motor accident in Namibia. It was on a Sunday, and I took the call. My wife, Anne, who I'll talk about just now, was in the shower. She had MS, and she was not able to do most things for the last 18, 19 years of her life. I was her carer, and she was in the shower, and I was showered with her. And the call came, and I suppose, fortunately, I left the shower, took the call, and went to the kitchen. It was a nurse in the hospital in a small town in Namibia that was on the call and said that his wife wanted to talk to me. And I said, that's a bit strange. What's wrong? And she said, let me get the wife. She called her, and she took about 2 minutes to come to the phone. She then said to me, hello, Dad, Derrick's been killed in a car crash.
Oof.
It was very bland. It was without feeling, and obviously terribly shocking.
Yeah.
I asked her some questions, what had happened, and she didn't seem to know too much. I asked her where Derrick's body was, and she shouted at the top of her voice at the nurse, where's Derrick's body? The nurse said, I think it's in the morgue in another town, I think it was another village.
So that hospital was where she was at the moment
she was
after
in
the
the
accident?
Hospital, yes.
Okay, so it wasn't where he was.
He was elsewhere in the morgue. But this was not in Windhoek, the big town. It was out in the country. I asked her when this had happened, and she said yesterday, but we found out later it was actually the day before. We found out later by going there that the accident occurred on a Friday evening or late afternoon. We're not sure, of course. They were in the middle of nowhere. They had a weekend, a long weekend together to visit the dunes, and they were going to Soosesvlei, a well-known tourist spot. And I think that there was an argument going on about money. They had just been married a year. She wanted to travel. Derrick had his own business and obviously couldn't travel like she wanted. And I say that because of other information which came up afterwards, of course. Anyway, I think she was trying to leave the car. He was either trying to bring her back into the car or shut the door. But in doing so, the car swerved slightly. And unfortunately, it hit a culvert, a concrete pillar, the beginning of a concrete bridge.
Okay.
And she was not in the car when it happened. She fell out. She rolled on the dirt road, of course, because everything is sand road there. Her injuries were on her left side only. They were somewhat superficial. We know from our visit later from the hospitals, my daughter had made sure they did a brain scan and there was no ill effect there. She had some fractured ribs and she had, cuts and bruises on the left side.
So just to be clear, when people listen, so you're talking about your daughter. Is that your daughter, or do you call your son's wife? Because she said, "Hello, Daddy." So
yes, no, when I say my daughter, I mean my daughter. Okay. Not daughter-in-law.
Okay. Because just when you started talking, when she called, she said, "Hello, Daddy." So that's, yes. I mean, she's not, that is your son's wife. Just Correct. To be clear for the people listening as well.
Correct. And
it sounds horrific, even if I listen to it and I've heard your story before, but I feel like a lump in my chest listening to such trauma coming to you and the way it was delivered to you. I'm sorry.
And of course, we didn't know some of what I've just said at that time.
Yeah.
I said, "Are you okay?" And she said, yes, she was okay, just battered and bruised and her ribs were sore. And I said that I would phone my brother, who was in Cape Town at the time, and he would fly to Windhoek to look after her. I said that my wife and I would fly out. And, of course, my daughter would fly out too. And she said, "Oh, that's fine." And that was it was not a long conversation.
Yeah, so they were living in South Africa at the time, your son, if I remember correctly. And
my son and her were in South Africa, yes.
And they were on a trip to Namibia.
He was a hydro engineer at that point, water engineer. And he had his own business.
Was there anyone else observing that accident or with them?
Oh, no.
So they were totally by themselves somewhere?
They were by themselves. And I suppose to go back and just finish what happened, he hit the concrete pillar at the beginning of the bridge, not at high speed. I think the expert we hired to go and investigate reckoned he was probably doing about 40 kilometers an hour at the time, but he hit full on and the car flipped and spun and obviously turned in the air and landed more or less under the bridge on its head.
Oh.
She claimed later she was in the car. We know that's not the case from her injuries and also from the fact that the car was squashed. Derrick was broken and there was no way to get out of the car. The doors didn't open, the windows didn't open. The back window had shattered. If you were not a person, but something much smaller, you could have got out the back window. But also what happened was she never reported. She never stayed up on the road. It seemed that on Saturday, almost all day, she stayed under the bridge with Derrick's body and with the car.
Okay. So she must have been quite in a shock herself, or apparently. And
yes, I think of course she had to be in shock. I don't think the intention was ever to cause the accident or to kill him, but her actions had caused the accident. And now she was trying to figure out, what am I going to say and what am I going to do? So she came up very late on Saturday up to the road. And as I say, it was very lonely out there. But when a car did go by, she flagged it down, and they took her to another 20, 30 kilometers to the nearest farm.
Oh.
The farmer was the one that went out to the accident scene. And he tried to open the door to get Derrick's body out with a crowbar. And I don't remember if he succeeded or not. But he said it was not a good scene. She was taken to the hospital. The police were called. And I think in the small hours of the morning, the police took the car and Derrick's body into the nearest police station, I guess.
Yeah.
And then Derrick's body was removed from the scene and taken to the morgue. And then the Sunday morning, about, as I say, around maybe 10 o'clock, I got the phone call.
Yeah.
My brother and his wife immediately packed up in Cape Town and went to Namibia. But first I had to go and tell my wife, who was still in the shower, what had happened. And that was probably the most traumatic event of our lives. I mean, how could it be worse? Exactly. And not knowing very much about what happened, because I had to look after, maybe saying I had to is not the right word, because I did look after my wife because I wanted to. I had to organize things. So there was no time for me to break down or cry or anything else. We hugged each other, and I got her out and got her dressed. And then I got about trying to reach my daughter, who was out in the country away from London, where she lived at the time. And she and her brother were soulmates. They were 1 year and 4 days apart. They weren't just brother and sister. They were best friends and confidants, and it was a very special relationship. She's the younger. Yeah, she was completely devastated, even on the phone. And this was, 10 years ago, so we didn't have video calls and all that.
Yeah.
I could feel the anguish and the terror.
Yeah.
In a way, terror is the word. And she had a new boyfriend at the time. Anyway, I then set about arranging a flight from London to Windhoek, and there aren't any. So she flew to Johannesburg, and then from Johannesburg to Windhoek, and managed to arrange all of that, and then had to arrange for us to get to Cape Town. I did not plan at that point for us both to go to Namibia. I thought it would be just too overwhelming for my wife. We went to Cape Town. I decided not to go because my daughter and my brother and his wife were all there, and I knew they could do what they had to do. That in itself was extremely difficult. My sister-in-law stayed with the wife all day, and my daughter slept in the same room with her every night. And there were scenes and so-called trauma and terror, and some of it must have been. And they had a very difficult time getting the body out, because Namibia is, we found, to a large degree Muslim, and they bury or cremate whatever the bodies the next day. And there are no cremation facilities in Namibia that were working. So we had to actually get permission to take the body. My daughter had to identify the body twice. My brother was with her, and he was frozen. Yeah, it was absolutely horrendous.
Yeah.
I can't imagine how it must have been for her and for my brother. Anyway, after a week, they did finally get permission to take the body by plane, but there was no cooperation from the authorities, none whatsoever. Everything was a fight. And the doctor also wouldn't release the wife because he or she, I don't know who the doctor was still worried about her trauma. But they did then release her because we had a memorial service. I think it was just over a week after he had died on a farm in Cape Town, wine farm.
Yeah.
And we wanted her there, of course, because she was what we had left of our son. And it was our business to look after her, to help her and, get her to be able to live on. Anyway, she did get permission to leave. My daughter and sister-in-law flew with her. Yeah, and my brother, I guess. But the body came on a separate plane. I'm not sure why. And in Cape Town, we waited and collected the body and took it to the morgue there. My mother had a large house on a farm, and we all stayed there. I had a hard time convincing her mother to come out, or her father wasn't in a position to come.
Where did
but
they
her
live
mother
at that
eventually
time? Did they didn't live in South Africa? Where are they from?
They lived in America.
Okay.
Sorry, she was American. Anyway, eventually she did come, and she stayed at my mother's home too. It's a long story, and it goes on and on.
Yeah. But I can
we
already...
eventually landed up in court. Oh, I should go back and say that he had friends from various parts of the world that flew out, including from the US, just for him. They said the most wonderful things about him. It was very encouraging and warm for us to know he was loved, he was honest, respected, and people went to him for help. We didn't know, of course, we knew most of that, but we didn't know that they all went to him when they had trouble. The very sad part, which just added to our grief, was after that, the wife told this group of people, Derrick's friends, who we had known for 7-8 years because most of them went to school together. I don't know what she told them, but she told them we were the worst, and we have not spoken with any of them since then.
Oh.
And that's, really sad, because we know it's not like that, and we know who they were, and we knew Derrick, and he doesn't pick friends easily. They're real people, but she managed to twist it.
Just loss upon loss.
We suffered after that. Interestingly, I think that my wife she was in a wheelchair at that time. She was for 18 years. But at that one night, she was at the wash basin brushing her teeth. And she felt her son behind her with his arms on her shoulders. And he didn't talk, and she didn't talk, and she looked into the mirror, and she thought she saw him there. And basically, he was telling her he was okay. And twice after that, when she was having massage, 2 of our friends had flown out to Cape Town to be with us, to be with her mostly. And they had massaged her legs and so on. But on 2 more occasions, she felt him very close. And that was very comforting.
That's beautiful.
Unfortunately, I have never had that experience. But when we were there for 3 months, and the visa's 3 months, and there was no way to extend it. And we flew to London. She was very sick at that time. She didn't really know much of what was going on. And we did get to London, and we were able to stay in London for 2 weeks. And I thought she was on her way, go and join Derrick. I had somebody come every day to treat her lungs to try and get her to breathe better. And after the 2 weeks, I was so frustrated with the situation. I phoned the travel agent back home and said, please book us flights, don't ask questions. And we did, and we got a driver at each end. We got back home. She doesn't remember anything from Cape Town to London, back home. She didn't remember anything.
So home was Switzerland for people listening, right?
Yeah. And we were due to go to the States for her brother's 60th birthday. And I told her after we were home that I'd canceled it because there was no way we could do that. And she looked at me and said, well, why not? And I said, because you're just not in a condition to travel. And she said, no, please don't cancel. We will go. And 2 weeks later, we were there. Amazing. It was midwinter, but 3 times in her life, she avoided the dying, and she was so close. If you're not ready, you're not ready, in spite of everything. We had a very hard time. The woman sued our daughter, didn't sue me, but sued our daughter because she was entitled under the law to have certain monies or values of what Derrick's estate was. And that was certainly no problem. In fact, we informed her about that. But she said repeatedly it wasn't enough. And she just wanted more and more. And she took us to court both in South Africa and in Switzerland. And even the judges said, what are you basing all this on? That took 4 years.
Oh.
The lawyers were very happy about it, both sides. But in the end, she got 50,000. All the rest was spent on her legal fees. That pain and suffering, especially for our daughter, made our grief and trauma more difficult. I think that people did say, what do you think Derrick found in her? I don't think either of us ever thought about the question, and should we blame Derrick for choosing somebody so wrong? He did ask me before he married, should he? And I said, do you love each other? And he said, yes, I think so. She makes me laugh. She makes me happy. And I didn't expect the question, so I hadn't thought about it. But, I just said that there are no guarantees in life. And if you feel confident enough and you can work together, because there are always ups and downs, and you feel she's the right person, then yes. And I did ask him about a contract, an antenuptial contract. And he said, but I have nothing, Dad. And that was more or less true, except that where we live, he was half owner. And we'd forgotten that. And we did that on purpose when we purchased our home. And that's really what gave her lots of ammunition to give 4 years of trouble. That was my mistake, but also his, because he knew and we both forgot.
So a lot of trauma and pain added on to the loss of your son in any case. But then that wasn't all. You also had Anne. And how much time between Derrick and Anne passed until she passed away?
She's gone 4 years tomorrow. I think that her life was shortened because of the trauma, because of the grief. And, losing a son or a daughter is not what's supposed to happen. But it does. We all know that. We don't all know that, fortunately, but we know it does happen. Anne suffered with MS, as I said, and she was in a wheelchair, as I said, for 18 years. Her quality of life was good. We traveled a lot. We were able to do all sorts of things that people said we couldn't do. We did, and we enjoyed our lives very much. it takes its toll. There's no cure. And slowly, the body winds down. It's interesting when I look back in the last year or two and I see photos of her in the last year or two. It's not quite how I remember her because I was with her all the time. When I look at the photos, I can see how she was going downhill, which I didn't see when I was with her.
Yeah.
And even the last days, I should, when I look back, have realized that they were the last days. But I didn't see that. The last month or the last 6 weeks, she developed a terrible bed sore problem. And she had 3 operations, in the hospital. I stayed with her in the hospital 24 hours. All that time, the doctors were wonderful. She just wanted to come home. And we did. And she was home about a week or 10 days before she died. When she died, I heard her take her last breath. It was 1:00 in the morning. And I knew I was able to sit with her. The distress was not so much losing her, but the fact that I couldn't reach my daughter because their phones were all off. It's the middle of the night. And eventually they did answer the landline and came. I had great comfort from the undertaker. And in our village, it's a lady, and she was amazing. And friends and family, of course. One friend, came over at 5 a.m. when I'd phoned her. And tomorrow we will go to the grave with her and her daughter. And we do that every year. Anne would like that. I think that, having lost her, I mean, of course, it's inevitable at some point, but you just don't know when, even though you should know when because you can see it. She's at peace. She did suffer in the end. But previous to that, her life was good. Her quality of life was good. And for me, that's what counts. When your quality of life is really bad, everybody suffers with the person. But Anne had a sense of humor until the end. I sadly have never had contact with her since she died. I have, had to get on with my life. I have a daughter. She lives on her own because things went wrong there with her boyfriend too, just adding to the whole trauma. Yeah, we've had good lives, but we've also suffered.
Oh, you definitely
substantial loss.
You had definitely substantial losses, definitely, and the added pain and trauma and challenges that you've mentioned are just huge. But I've known you for a few years now, Ian, and given that you're saying it's 4 years tomorrow since Anne died, how did you deal with your grief and loss? The way I see you, you have really gratitude for life, and you do something and you're active. How did you manage that?
Because of Anne's situation, I was always very busy organizing, planning, trying to make life as smooth and as convenient as possible. I'm used to that because I've been doing that for so long. After she died, it was just me. My daughter was in another country at the time. I couldn't see her that often. I did have, friends around me, good friends. And by chance, very fortunately, my brother and his wife moved, 45 minutes away from me at about that time. The angels were on my side because I have them. I see them at least once a week. We talk very often. It's been a big help in my life and a real blessing. And all my friends and her friends have supported me tremendously too. Yeah, grieving, it's quite hard for me to define my grief. After Derrick died, there wasn't that much grieving because I was too busy. And I couldn't just be on my own or just cry by myself because I always had too much to do. It's not an excuse. It's just how it was. We managed. The two of us managed. And we got on with life, and we continued to, travel. We did not change what we didn't have to change. His room is still in the house. It's still his room. When I talk about it, when people come to visit and they stay there, I say it's his room. The decoration hasn't changed. His paintings and things hang around the house, of course. He's all around us. There was a beautiful poem, I can't think of it, that Anne read at the memorial service for him, about I'm not there, but I'm still around you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. I'm not gone.
I don't know. We managed.
I'm not gone. I'm just in a different room.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, I have managed. I've, been busy. I certainly never wanted to move home after my wife died, and I don't plan to in the future. I'm happy here. It's beautiful. I'm in the mountains, and it's small, but it's fine. And I do travel. I'm busy enough. In fact, I'd like more time at home sometimes.
I mean, one of the things that I see as a resource, and you tell me if that's correct, what I see from knowing you is that you have a gift to gather the people around you that support you, that's friends, family, and that you also nurture the relationship that you have with them on a regular basis. I mean, I see the way you speak about them and the way you meet and organize yourself. You mentioned before that you didn't have time after Derrick died to grieve. You were so busy. What do you see, or how was that different after Anne died? If it was different, or how did you experience yourself in the grief and loss then?
I think it was different because I no longer had the program that I used to have, and that there was just me, because my daughter wasn't here, and she was dealing with her own grief, obviously. She'd lost her brother and her mother, as I had. She had a hard time. I had a hard time. Yeah, she had an added burden in losing her partner. That was traumatic. I suppose I remember her a lot. All of her is still around me. And I did talk to her more frequently in the first years than I do now. But I still feel very much that she's around. I felt very good that her worldly goods, her clothes, her shoes, her jewelry, for the most part, we gave to people, friends who wanted them and wear them. I have a number of friends, when I go and have lunch with them, they wear the jewelry they got from Anne. I like that.
Yeah, that's
that
beautiful.
Helps me.
That's beautiful.
A lot of people said, aren't you going to move and run away from everything that... And for me, definitely not. I can understand some people might, but that wasn't the case with me. Everything was good, and it still is good. And I have my memories here. Why run away from them?
And
they're good memories.
You said something interesting. You said, you described the story about Anne feeling Derrick's behind her when she was watching him in the mirror. And two things you said about Derrick and Anne. You say, I feel that they're very much still around me. And the stories that I hear from people on the podcast and also my clients is there's different versions of people around us and how we sense them. And just this morning, Ananda May asked me, Mommy, do you miss your mom? And I said, yes. And she said, but I never see you sad. And I'm like, and then I explained when the sorry is and how that is different now that it's 10 years and that the very sad part was in her first 2 years of life. And she said, that's true. I don't really remember that. And so we were talking about the cat who just died 10 days ago and how she feels sad when she walks past his belongings. And I said, yes. And then maybe I'm not just right there. And it's not something that you speak, and it's inside of you, but you still feel him. So I think it's important to notice different ways that people can show up in terms of still feeling them around us. It's different for each and every one, and the symbols and the signs and the sensations that we get vary.
I think on that line, what I found interesting is from time to time, not regularly, but from time to time, when I'm in the car, more especially, and it's usually driving back home, I have the radio on. More often than not, it's classical music, but not always. And sometimes whatever is playing makes me extremely emotional, takes me to them. I can't explain that, but it just does. And I have been in a concert hall listening to a concert and felt the same.
Yeah.
Just one of those things.
Exactly. And I believe that when whatever happens takes us to them, or like my daughter speaking about them, that's a connection. Whichever way it is, if it's us thinking about them or them showing us in terms of a sign. And the classical concert, I remember just the first thing that I did going out after my daughter died was to a classical concert in Sydney, to the Philharmonic Orchestra. And it was overwhelmingly beautiful and overwhelmingly sad at the same time, because the presence was so close and was so tangible. So what do you think your journey has taught you? How do you see life different now after those times with loss and pain?
Well, of course, my life is very different. I only have the responsibility to my daughter now. I don't have the responsibility to the other half of the family. I miss them greatly. My life is not as good without them, that's for sure. And in spite of all the work that Anne's position entailed, I miss that. I have a lot more freedom now, but I prefer it as it was. I didn't need the freedom, I was free. Life was good. That's not for everybody, and my life was good. Is it good now? Yeah, in a different way. Is it as happy as it was? No.
And that's the reality.
That's just how it is, and it won't change. But I have a responsibility to my daughter to get on with life and to be there for her when she needs me. Fortunately, I suppose for me, my friends rely on me sometimes, and I have a responsibility to help whoever and do what I can. I'm okay. Where it goes in the next years, I see it much the same. I don't see dramatic changes. I'm really not interested in traveling the world and doing all that. No need.
And still, from knowing you, I see that you have a quality of making the most of what is around us. I mean, I've known you since the beginning of the COVID phase, so the life changed dramatically. And still, from all the things that I've heard from you or seen from you, how you have dealt with life, there's an outlook that you say, okay, how can I make this work for me? And how can I not stop living? I really want you and the listeners to hear that, because I've known you for a short period of time, but quite closely. And I think it's important to see that as well, that this is possible because you're making something about it. You are taking part in life, and taking care of people is part of that in your way of doing that. So thank you, Ian. And the last thing that I do with each of my guests here, I'm going to just ask some simple sentence starters. It's like the rapid fire question. So the first one is, grieving and trauma means?
I guess means loss. It means sadness. It means a big hole.
And healing means?
Trying to close the hole. Moving on with life takes different amounts of time for different people, I think. But yeah, just healing takes time.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Healing takes time. And the third one is, what I've learned about myself in the light of loss and trauma?
It's harder than I thought it would be. Of course, the loss of Derrick, I never expected that. With the loss of Anne, I did know that would happen. And how I've dealt with it, I hope mostly in the right way. No one's perfect. But, mostly it's for my daughter, not for me.
Mm.
I have to be okay and heal to support her.
One thing I wish people knew about loss and trauma.
That it's always hard, and don't think it's not, and don't run away from it.
One thing that has changed that you wouldn't want to miss.
Yeah, that's quite difficult. I think that what I'm happy with is my daughter is doing much better, and she is healing some ways better than me, and her life is improving and she's settling, and that's the most important thing. So I'm glad I'm here for that.
Mm. And I think I'm also hearing that you're also glad that she's closer to you now. Also in distance, as much as also this is your person from your family that is here with you. Mm.
Yes. I suppose one other thing I could add to that, I wouldn't want to miss my brother and his wife being close by.
Yeah, beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Ian. Thank you for your time and your willingness to be so authentic and open with us. This is a very powerful story that you're telling us here. Thank you so much for your willingness to be here for that.
Pleasure, Natalie. Hopefully it helps somebody else too.
Thanks for listening to How to Deal with Grief and Trauma. If you'd like to be updated on future episodes, please subscribe to my newsletter on nataliehimmelrich.com. If you need grief support, please contact me for a 30 minutes free discovery session. How to Deal with Grief and Trauma is produced and edited by me, Natalie Himmelrich. To support this podcast, please rate, review, and subscribe to or follow the podcast on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you. And remember to keep reading. I promise it will get easier.